please.
Just try not to step on the chairs. Okay, we're back with our opening debate. The headlinecircle.com public candidate debate here in Port Orange at Lakeside Community Center. We have Port Orange City Council District 2, Sarah Jones and Jones-Tramont, two newcomers to elective office. Is that correct? Yes. Okay, I'm going to sit with you and we'll just pass the microphone that way. Sarah Jones, please tell us about why you're running, a little bit about who you are and why you're running, and I will give you 3 minutes.
And where's the phone?
Right in front of you.
Okay.
Okay, just go ahead.
It says 257.
That's all right. Just don't worry about it.
Oh, okay. I'm Sarah Jones. I'm very pleased to be here. I want to thank everybody who's come to hear this debate. I came to Port Orange in 1995 with my husband. I had retired early as a chemist. I worked as a chemist in a public health lab, a job I enjoyed very much. And I retired early because my husband was 20 years older than I, and I wanted to spend some quality time with him. And we came to Florida. And I enjoyed it very much. As I was saying one night at this city council meeting, at that time we kayaked a lot. And I will always remember the first day we put the kayaks in on Halifax, and we went up to Spruce Creek. And I saw it was the first time I had ever seen Spruce Creek, and I was absolutely amazed. And it's one thing that as I run for office to preserve the beauty that we have in this area. I have a long history of working in community activities, and as an employee of Bonneville County as a chemist, I was very active in my labor union, and I was a negotiator. I headed the negotiation team for a unit of over 3,000 employees. I'm accustomed to working with government. I'm accustomed to knowing that sometimes you give the best you can and that you have to make compromise and that things are not perfect. I am a widow. I therefore have, and I point this out, I do not have a lot. I am no longer an active mother. I don't have a job. I have the time and the energy and the expertise to do a good job. I do have, and I think most people notice it, and I bring it up front. I have a handicap. I was born probably with a stroke at birth, and so I limp. And if this was a contest for the Olympics, you should not elect me. If this is a contest for your brain and your ability to negotiate and figure out what is the right thing for this city, you should elect me. I'll be very frank, I also like government. It's a hobby of mine. I'm interested. I really like to do it. And I also want to run because I want to do the best for the people. I have a belief that every human being has an ethical responsibility to help other human beings as best they can. But I would be less than honest if I did not also say that I enjoy it. It's really something I like to do. Some people like to collect stamps. I like to do government. And I think that's good, because if you're interested in it, you're going to do a good job. And I've met a lot of people, some of whom I agree with and some of whom I disagree with, and some of whom have taught me something and changed my opinion. And I really respectfully ask you to listen to me tonight, and I respectfully ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. You can pass the microphone.
Yes, in the line too here.
Mr. Tremont, 3 minutes, please. You don't have to go a whole 3 minutes. You don't have to. Okay.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jones-Tramont. I just want to thank everyone for being here. Thank you so much for being here. It's an honor to sit with you discuss the issues tonight. I am a husband and a father of 4 children. We just had our 4th daughter 3 months ago, a little over 3 months ago. And I grew up in Port Orange. Born in 1979, and our family moved here in 1984, I believe, back when there was 26,000 people. So I've seen it grow quite a bit. I've seen it develop. I've seen a lot of new people come in and go. I'm extremely passionate about the city. Why am I running? I teach American history at Spruce Creek High School right here in Port Orange. And every year, and I've mentioned this before, and I'll mention it again tonight, every year I ask my students, raise your hand, how many of you guys trust the government? And nobody's hand goes up, as you can imagine. And that discourages me as a teacher, as an American, that our students are raised in a generation of negativity where they cannot trust the people that are in position to make decisions for them and their futures. That's discouraging to me. Ultimately, I decided to get involved and run for office because I simply have a lot. People call me naive, call me have great aspiration, whatever you wish. My ultimate goal is to bring honesty and integrity back into government. Because as a history teacher, I know there was once a time when people could trust the government. Because if you asked that question back in the 1950s to every student across America, how many of you all trust the government? Every hand's going to go up. So there used to be a time when honesty and integrity did exist. Now, I'm not suggesting that there is not some in there today. I'm simply suggesting that I want to be a part of it. Not just teaching history, but I want to be a part of making and changing history. As to why I'm running for Port Orange City Council, my dad told me, rest in peace, passed away a few years ago, was also a teacher in the area. My mom and she both, in Volusia County, dating back to the 60s. My dad told me a long time ago when I was a kid, he said, son, when you get in the car and go off with your friends somewhere, make sure you're the one behind the wheel. And that stuck with me all my life. In every aspect of my life, I tried to carry that concept and that way of thinking into all the areas of my life. When I get behind the wheel, inside the car, I want to be behind the wheel. As an athlete, on the baseball field, if we needed an out, I just prayed and begged that they would get it to me at shortstop. When the game was on the line, I wanted to be the one to take the shot. Not because I wanted the accolation and the praise, but because I knew that nobody has prepared themselves more for that moment than me. So when it comes to the future of my family and myself and my kids, I want to be the one that will involved.
James, you keep the microphone with you. I'm going to put the first question in your corner. What does the term nonpartisan mean to you?
Time is.
It doesn't matter.
Nonpartisan simply means no party affiliation. No party affiliation.
But what does that mean in terms of an everyday experience, in terms of reality?
Well, I think it means that when you're making decisions, policy decisions based on when you're making policy decisions based on your city, you shouldn't be, I guess, bound to just what your party is going to say. And that's what's going to ultimately influence your decision.
Okay, which one has Mr. Jones? Sarah Jones, he explained nonpartisan. Do you agree with that?
Not entirely.
Okay, what is your interpretation of nonpartisan?
My understanding of nonpartisan and why it came about in Florida, because it doesn't exist in many other parts of the country, is that a decision was made that some of the positions and by least lower, I don't mean less important, but at the home state of government, it's not so important about the larger policies that we might look at the federal level, like Social Security. These issues are not important at the local level. At the local level here in the city, what's important is that the sewers work, that the water comes out of the faucet, that when it rains, the streets don't flood, and that the parks are available for the children. Those are the issues of local government, and therefore they're not part of a parks idea.
Let me invite you back to Mr. Strayline. What about the issue of party affiliation? There's a lot of people feel there's a disconnect with the voters, where you've got Republican and Democrat at the state level and the federal level, and Ms. Jones brought up the issue of water. I can give an example, like in Michigan, where that town has water that's virtually poisonous, and that goes all the way to the federal level. Do you feel elections locally should be Democrat, Republican, whatever, or do you feel it should be NBA?
That's a good question.
And the reason why I'm asking you is because there's a pretty intense focus even now on Republican and Democrat, party opponents, labeling them for candidates to the voters, regardless of the NBA or at the local level. So,
Well, if you're asking if I think that it should be changed, then my answer would be yes. I think it should be a party affiliated. Because the fact of the matter is, they are already party affiliation races. They might call it an NBA race, but as something I've learned in Volusia County politics, there's no such thing as non-party affiliation. Both parties are going to get actively involved. And it should matter. I think voters should know what your political party affiliation is with, because how you believe ultimately determines how you make decisions, what your philosophy is, what your ideology is, what your political viewing is, and where you stand. That's going to determine how you answer questions, how you react on policy decisions, whether or not you're going to be a tax and spend kind of person, or you're going to keep lower taxes and keep government out of business. So yeah, I think that it should be changed, and all local politics should be partisan.
Ms. Jones, do you agree with your opponent, Mr. Tremont?
I understand where he's coming from, and I agree with him that it's no secret if you run for a local office and you're affiliated with a party, everybody knows it, and everybody gets some support from that party. But I'll also tell you, particularly at the local government level, and I've been around, I have many more years than you, I have seen that at a local government level, you often find that you are in agreement with somebody on a local issue, whereas in national politics, you might be totally and absolutely in disagreement. Because
let me ask you this, and sometimes I will jump in, so please don't take it personally.
I'm not taking it personally, I'm just
You talked earlier, you said you were supportive of union advocacy, right?
I said that I have a long history of involvement in labor unions. I am currently a union officer for a retiree local New York State retirees who
So the reason why I asked that is to make the correlation about local politics versus state and national, where traditionally the Democrats would be supporting the labor unions and the movement of everyday workers, whereas Republicans would be more of a bigger picture of the management and the ownership of the company. Do you think that translates to the local level?
I think I just said, no, not part.
What?
And the reason I say that is because I have sat at the Port Orange City Council meetings for probably a full year now, and I have found myself thinking very closely with an individual and agreeing with him on city politics, whereas in national politics, I could not be in greater disagreement. And this is what happens, because local issues are local issues, and national issues are national issues. And often you find at the local level, and this has happened to me, that I am totally agreement with somebody on the local level that I do not agree with on the national issues. And I actually think the nonpartisan system has an advantage. At first I didn't, because I came from a state without it, and I became less that way.
Okay, Mr. Tremont, we see a lot of people, especially in the news media, send us their endorsements from, firefighters or Teamsters committees or realtors or, construction. Why is that so important to candidates if MBA doesn't matter?
Keep me more clear.
In other words, there are people that will solicit, there are people that will solicit and boast that I've got this union or I've got that union, and then others will say, well, wait a minute, you're telling us you're a Republican, but you're pushing this union which supports the Democrats at the national level, and vice versa. So how does that trickle down?
Okay, good question. Well, first of all, number one, I've been going to meetings for the past 2 years, not one, and I think this notion of living longer is going to be more beneficial than actively being a good decision maker. I may not have the experience in politics that my opponent has, which actually in today's day, I'm glad about that. I'm not a politician, I'm a decision maker. I make decisions every day that affect the lives of hundreds of teenagers, and the result, thousands of families in Port Orange, in our very city. I make decisions every single day in the lives of my family, my children, my wife, my future. So this isn't really an election about political experience. It's an election about who's the better decision maker. Now, as it comes down to unions, I don't have one union support, not one union endorsement. They're not endorsement. We're not even a teachers union this endorsement. And I'm a school teacher. Never wants to bet it. But I would say it's interesting that the two unions that actively are strong in Port Orange, the police union and the fire union, neither one of them have endorsed any of this. And the only union that has vetted me is the fire union, and they have yet to give those anyway. So all these other Teamsters, my opponent has received thousands of dollars. As a matter of fact, I'd say 40% of her contributions that come from unions all across the state. The rest of the 40% are from her own bank account. The rest of the 20% are from a few people in Port Orange. The rest of them around the country. People that endorsed me are local people, working people,
Well, let's just be clear for the audience, and the people who see this on video. Neither of you have been elected to a public office, is that correct? Neither of you.
That's right.
So you say she's may have more experience than you. She may be more politically active, but she's not, hasn't sat in the dais.
correct. I was just speaking of her own experience that she
I have set up.
You want to give a response, then we'll move on to another topic.
I simply said that I have been active in government, and I have been active in organizations and labor unions, and I understand politics. And your characterization of all labor unions as liberal is not entirely accurate. I have to say that for the record.
Good, you can give a response and move on.
just a quick response. I can make the characterization.
I gave the generalizations that people typically accept. Let's talk about something else now. Let's talk about being on the dais. What is the role of a city council member on the dais?
One of the things that I have learned, because in my earlier years, I was accustomed to a strong mayor type of government. Can everybody hear me? In Port Orange, in many of the local governments, it's a city manager type of government, which says that the council makes policy and the city manager executes that policy. One of the problems that I have with what goes on in the city of Port Orange is that many times it is the city manager that makes policy, and the city council sits there and lets it go by.
Give us an example.
I can give you an example. I wouldn't have come up with that idea if I didn't have an
What
example.
example?
Okay. The example is when Jake Johansson became city manager, one of the first things he did was cut off access to the city manager emails. And in order to get them, you had to go through a long and lengthy process, and before they were readily available. Now, that was a policy decision. The council just acquiesced. Jake said he was doing it, and they went along with it.
They take a formal vote?
They did not, and now they could have very well voted to agree with him, but they simply let him make the decision and they acquiesced to it. And that's one of the things that goes on in Port Orange that I think has to be changed. The city council has to recognize that they make policy, and it's entirely normal for a city manager to want to have as much power as he or she can. And it's necessary for a city council to be alert to the strengths and powers that they have and not let them become diluted, which has happened.
Okay, Ms. Jones. Mr. Tremont, you want to respond and then give your just definition of what it means to be on the dais?
Yes, and I'm well aware of that decision to remove the email read file. And frankly, I agree. This should have been done. This should have been a policy decision made by the council. Years ago, Ken Parker was the one that pushed that through to initially put it on there, and the council agreed. So it was a policy decision. This should have been a policy decision to remove it. But I think those examples are few and far between. Now, there are people that disagree a lot with what the manager does and what he wants to do. That's different from him enacting policy away from the approval from the council. Council's role is simply put to set policy, to give direction, to give vision to where the city wants to go, and keep accountable that city manager to do his job. I'll be honest, I'm not on the fence, but I can understand why some would want for a stronger mayor council to have a lot more, I should say, inspection and a lot more oversight to how the city works in other departments. It's certainly up for a debate, and I can see merits to it. And that would require a charter change to do that. But as of right now, our job is simply to set policy, give direction to the city manager, and then hold him accountable to make sure he's doing his job and he's making sure everybody else does his job.
All right, let me ask you this, Mr. Tremont. Who do you as the ultimate boss when the city is doing official business on that diet? If we understand that the city manager is the CEO, he does the day-to-day operations of that are approved by the council. But who is the boss? Who ultimately is, do you report to him? Does he report to you? You meaning the collective body?
Well, ultimately, the citizens of Port Orange are the ultimate bosses. But when it comes to decision making, yeah, the council is the ultimate boss. The manager has the power given to him to make decisions, but when it comes to minor decisions, they don't need to be brought up to council. But big time decisions that are really going to impact how the city operates and what it's going to cost the taxpayers, and absolutely, yeah, that should be brought up before council.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Jones, you want to respond?
I do want to respond. The council is the ultimate boss, and the city manager does the day-to-day. He hires and he fires those under him. But what the council has to remember is the city manager serves at their pleasure, and they can hire and fire him. And that is the power they have over the city manager. So the other thing the council has to do, and that is be a very close watchdog of what goes on in the city. And if you read the city charter, you see that although they cannot make the proper decisions, they can go in and inspect, and they can watch very closely. And that's one function that a city council should do, and that takes a fair amount of time. But you have to be aware of what is going on in each department, and you have to carefully research the items that are put up to you for vote. And that is a time-consuming job.
Okay, Ms. Jones, I'm going to leave the mic with you for a minute. Tell us what you believe going into 2016 November general election, where the two of you won and chosen by the voters.
Actually, it's August.
Oh, August, oh, that's right. Orange is a different scenario. Okay, so in the August 30th primary, which is basically your general election, tell the audience and public what you feel is the number one priority issue for Port Orange right now.
The number one priority issue is controlled development. Development is going to occur in Port Orange, but it has to be controlled and carefully watched.
What does that mean, controlled development?
It means, for instance, that we don't want to repeat Dunlawton Avenue. Dunlawton Avenue occurred because too many businesses were put too close together with direct access to the highway. It is the type of development that occurred in the previous century. And as we develop and we permit new developments that are going to occur around I-95, we have to take into account the traffic patterns, we have to take into account the amount of green space, the parks, the proper facilities, and that the quality of life in Port Orange remains what it is today. I was at one meeting with a lot of active city councils from Oak Hill and Smyrna Beach and Edgewater, and we had a discussion about what is the duty of a city council person. And the final decision was to ensure that the quality of life that we experience today, that many of them experienced as children, is retained for the next generation.
Right.
And this does not happen if crazy development goes on.
So your priority number one is controlled development.
And so that the quality of,
right.
So that the quality of, I got it.
Okay, Mr. Tremont, just briefly, if you agree or disagree, without too much talk, discussion, and then what is your priority number one issue for Port Orange?
Well, I don't agree with being my priority number one. I agree with the development. My priority number one, I think it should be at any level of government, is public safety. Whether you're the president, whether you're the governor, county chair, or the mayor, your priority number one is to keep people safe. Now that encompasses a lot of things. That encompasses not just police and fire and rescue, it also encompasses organized traffic pattern. That encompasses economic development and economic redevelopment. If you don't do something about the blighted areas, naturally, those areas are going to bring a little more crime. We're also expecting to get roughly 75,000, to top the scale, about 75,000 residents in the next decade. And with more people comes more opportunities for crimes. Public safety is priority number one, and that encompasses a lot of things: clean drinking water, organized traffic patterns, proper equipment and technology for police and fire rescue.
You agree with Ms. Jones?
I think public safety is important, and clean water, efficiency, I think they're all important, and I think they're all part of development. I don't think in the city of Port Orange, fortunately, the policing of crime is currently a problem, and it has to remain that way. But I think development, and this took me a long time to appreciate this, but I would sit at city council and I would watch them talk about landscaping and keeping a certain amount of growth. And I used to think to myself, well, they're doing it again, they're planting flowers. But that is what's very important, and I don't know how many of you realize, but the fact that Port Orange looks good affects the way people behave. People don't throw trash on the ground if their surroundings looks good. So I do think development in all aspects is very important.
We're running out of time rapidly, so we got a couple of things in. Back to you, Mr. Tremont, and keeping with the theme of public safety. As someone who's covered breaking news and the cops and police for 20 years, I know the level of intensity in the Port Orange Police Department. If you're like 10 miles over the limit on Princeton Road, you're getting a ticket, which is good. You know, some people also talk about homelessness, and the way you eradicate homelessness is you keep your neighborhoods clean, you enforce your zoning, and your building inspections. Do you agree with that?
Do I agree with
In terms of not allowing homelessness to overwhelm and like the situation Daytona now has.
Sure. You know, homelessness is certainly, I know it's a hot button in Volusia County. And the idea that Port Orange is not affected by homelessness is, I think, is incorrect. I think Port Orange does have our fair share of homeless people. And I believe we have a moral responsibility to take an active role in solving that problem and contribute. Now, I do believe that homelessness is a social service, and social services where they typically fall under the county. I believe it's a county issue. Now, if it's going to be put back on the cities, well, you know what? I don't want to turn my head to it. Ultimately, I want to go partner with the city. I don't want to leave Daytona stuck with everything, because we certainly do have a fair share of homelessness. And I'll tell you what, you know, with Riverwalk opening up, let me tell you, that's going to draw in some more. I've been over there 3 times in the past week and a half to walk around and survey it.
And to be clear, what is the Riverwalk project? With Orange, we don't know what that is.
Okay.
What's that for Orange?
Okay, well, I think if they've been watching this before, we'll know what Riverwalk is, but this is a whole development that's going on Bridgewood and Tompac. So we're putting in a park over there. We've got some development that's going to be happening. But as you have a park over there that's publicly owned, it has the propensity to turn into a place like City Island. And we certainly don't want that, because all down Bridgewood, you know, from Edgewater up to Norman, it's a tough area to redevelop. So what we need to do is partner up with other cities. We need to have a place where we are participating. It's not the problem in Port Orange that it is in Daytona Beach, but it is a problem. And we can't ask people to leave the Riverwalk area unless we have a place to send them to.
Ms. Jones, do you agree with him on the homeless issue?
Yeah, substantially, I do agree. One, I think it's a moral and ethical problem that we as human beings have to treat other human beings in a proper manner. 2, I think it's essentially a county problem, and I think several of the city councils have said that. It's not a problem that can be attacked city by city. And the cities may cooperate, may help, but the county has to approach it as a county, and we have to, and I don't disagree, it is a problem.
Folks, we're running rapid out of time. We have a couple of questions. Mr. Tremont, let's get back to public safety. We talked about how Port Orange is a good community with the emphasis on good law enforcement, speed, traffic control, and safety. Let's talk about what a lot of people are concerned about with unions and the law enforcement, police and fire, with the pensions. Some people say they're not sustainable in the long run. I know in Tallahassee for the first time, there's concern about these pensions, not just fire departments anymore. What's your response to that? How are you dealing with that, Dias?
Well, you can't answer that in 30 seconds, obviously, but I've had multiple conversations. Okay, I've had multiple conversations with our city manager and our finance director, who's met them 2.5 hours a day. I've met with our fire union, and I've met with our police union, probably about a dozen times. And it certainly is a problem. It's not sustainable as it is. There are a multitude of ideas that can be approached, but it's not an easy fix. If it were easy, it'd be solved already. I think one option would be a transfer to the FRS system, for the retirement system, which is beneficial to a lot of people in that situation. Now, you can't force them. Now, you can force them. That wouldn't be the right thing to do. There's all sorts of benefits for that to get the city off that payment, with the exception of the ones that are still in. You don't want to mess it up with people that get invested. Now, I'll tell you one of the reasons that I believe the fire union hasn't endorsed my opponent or myself, and the police hasn't endorsed anybody, is I've had a chance to talk to them. And I have not made promises. Promises are an insult now to voters and even union reps. They don't want to be promised things anymore. Why? Because they've been promised things time and time again, and those promises don't come to fruition. So what they want, what I believe these union representatives want, what these firefighters, what the police union, what the workers want, is fairness. Now, there's nobody that would be able to relate with them better than myself. I'm a school teacher. I know what it feels like to be underappreciated, undervalued, and underpaid. I have a thankless job, so nobody can relate to them better than I. Yet at the same time, I'll tell them, listen, I cannot promise you anything, but what I will promise you is fairness and honesty. And if somebody sitting in that seat that knows exactly what you're going through, so I'm going to fight for it.
Thank you. Ms. Jones, your response to the only action that you're saying about the foundation. The pensions came in the long run, if you change that.
First of all, I want to respond to what you said, I think referring to FRS, the Florida Retirement System. We'll talk about that. The Florida Retirement System is solvent. It is not in great need. And as a matter of fact, the 3% that the public employees are now paying into the system is going into the general fund, not into the Florida Retirement System. And so when Chase suggested that the local pensions, it is, I can see cases of this concern out there, but the fact is the money that's being paid by Florida employees, Florida State and Florida employees, is not going into the FRS.
I believe you have drop program, is what I meant to say, that's the right now.
Okay, I'm not talking, you didn't mention drop program, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when the governor asked the state employees to make a contribution, that goes into the general fund. Two, Chase mentioned that one of the solutions might be for the local fire and police pensions to be absorbed into the FRS. I think that's a great idea. I know there's another gentleman sitting in the audience who thinks it's a great idea. The problem is it's not as simple as the pensioners making that decision that it's acceptable. It's actually quite a costly venture for the city to do that. And that's one of the hesitations for doing it. So, and I also believe that we have to solve the pension system, that part of the public service is the promise of a pension for the risk and the salaries that they have. But FRS, I just want to emphasize that it is not an individual decision, it would have to be a decision made by the city of Port Orange, and it would be a costly decision. And it may be one they choose to make because in the long run it's the best way, but it's not something we're always going to say.
We got one last question. We had a long time city manager here who had the community staff, the media staff, and that was Ken Parker. And then all of a sudden, like a volcano, this thing about the water scandal came up. And then we had a very short, limited city manager who came and went. And then people I'm trying to get at with that is sometimes people describe people on the dais as rolling over for a week to the city manager. And then there are others that say, well, sometimes people in office are bullies, and people in the audience are bullies and beat them up. They don't want to stay. What do you say to that as a prospective elected candidate, like office?
This is what I was saying, exactly.
And in terms of the bulliness or the rolling over, how do you balance that?
Right. Well, nobody wants to work for a bully. Nobody wants to have a negative working environment. But you've got to understand, you've got two entities that are fighting to do their jobs. City manager's trying hard to do his job, council's trying hard to do their job. And it should be going in the same direction, but oftentimes it doesn't. You've got 5 other people up there that might disagree with the city manager. You have 2 or 3 people. That's what happens when you bring a lot of different leaders together under one umbrella. You're going to have disagreements, you're going to have bickering, you're going to have chaos in some way. So ultimately, you want to find people that are going to work together, that are not going to be, when it talks about rubber stamps for development. And we've had councils that are running stand for development. I don't believe that's the case at all. You know, I think I'm not going to give an insult to our guys that much. Say that you probably can develop in Port Orange, and we have a reputation all around town. We're a tough place to do business here. So when you get into the situation of county manager versus the council, it shouldn't be a versus. We're all going to work together. No one should be bullied. At the same time, no one should roll over. You're rolling over. You're not doing your job. You're not being ready. You're doing a very great research for your citizens.
Thank you. Ms. Jones,
I think basically the question was, the change in government where they lost a long time.
well, striking the balance happened.
Right. I don't think the city was, I think what happened was in Port Orange, for a long time, we had a city manager, Ken Parker, who was a very strong leader. And then when he retired, whenever a very strong leader leaves, there's a vacuum, there's a period of turmoil, there's a period of change. And a lot of departments, I think it was more or less a period of change that they chose to lead. That they had worked under one system for most of their career, and they were able to retire, and they chose to retire. So we're now looking at the city of Port Orange, which is essentially restructuring itself. And it's restructuring itself, I'd like to speak in a way that is different and maybe reflects the times. There's one thing about it that I have liked. And that is nowadays, as we go out and look for new department heads, which is understandable, we seem to be getting the young professionals who go from their allegiances to their job, not to the city. The old retired professionals more or less came up through the ranks. And one thing I would like to see is when we look for new department heads in the future, rather than looking at a young person or a person who comes in and interviews, and they have a history going from city to city to city, and the city of Port Orange is more or less a stop along the career path, that we seriously look in the departments that we have, and we staff on hand to see if there is a person in-house who can also take that department head and consider that person, because that person has more of allegiance to the city than somebody who's just going to.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. We're going to do our closings now. 2 minutes max. Ms. Jones, you go first.
First of all, I want to thank, where's my mom?
Wait till what?
Just go ahead.
Okay,
I'll let you know.
I want to thank everybody in the audience that came. I want to thank them for listening to both of us, and I hope it's been an interesting and educational experience for you. I'm very much dedicated to the city of Port Orange. I enjoy the city of Port Orange. My opponent spoke about funding, and I want to speak to that funding that when you receive a sum of money from a living room, which I certainly have, you are receiving the sum of money from individual workers, from many women who have donated out of their pocket small amounts of money to make the large pool. When you receive a large sum of money, such as $1,000 from 2 trucking firms, you are receiving a sum of money from one gentleman who owns a big business. I really would like to. I would like to close very much and.
Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize. I just let this
Okay. I would like to emphasize one other thing that I would like, is one of my issues on my website. I would like to see the city, when they put items up for bid, for services or construction, that they give a preference, not guaranteed, but a preference to local contractors and local providers, so that our tax money stays in the locality and helps the economy. I would also like to see a preference given when there are large construction jobs to firms that have an apprentice program in place. These firms, they need not be in, but the firms that have these programs in place deserve that preference, because they are making a profession in the trades available to men and women. And again, I respectfully ask every one of you to consider me and to vote for me on August 30th for early voting or mail voting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Move to the next.
Again, I echo my opponent's statements. I appreciate everybody being here. Thank you, Sarah, for joining us tonight. I want to say with all due respect, though, in regard to the comment about unions supporting, meaning that they're from individuals, you received a $250 contribution from the teachers union. I paid to the union all the fall last year. I assure you, I did not contribute to your campaign. These are decisions that are made by the people at the front end. They're not the average workers that are making that decision. So I just wanted to state that very clearly. My race is simply, as I mentioned before, public safety is priority number one. If people aren't safe, it doesn't matter what priority number 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 is. And again, that entails a lot of different things. But ultimately, I'm the guy that you want representing, and here's why. I know what it's like, and I take my political principles into this public office. I have no interest in raising taxes. I know how to live within my means. I'm a school teacher. I have 4 children. We are paycheck to paycheck. I know what it feels like to watch that needle rise every time I fill up my gas tank. I know what it feels like, what it does to the gut of my stomach when I look at my receipt at the end of buying groceries. I know what it feels like to count the pennies in my little jar at the end of the month to see how much I have left to hopefully take my kids out for ice cream. There's nobody that can relate to the average citizen like I've always talked many times about the little guy getting great. I am the little guy. I'm the guy that here is trying to represent all the others that are just like myself. I want to keep Port Orange beautiful. I want to keep it safe. And I want to keep it very affordable to live here. So I'm Jones-Tramont. I appreciate your vote. I appreciate your support.
Mr. Tramont made the comment about the teachers union. I think it says something when the teachers union does not support a teacher and comes and supports him. Right. It says when the teachers union chose to support me, and they chose to support me because I have supported the teachers, I have walked with the teachers, I have spoken for the teachers in all of their needs.
Very brief.
Well, I didn't expect a rebuttal after my closing, but I'm happy to. I am a teacher, okay? And I was a member of the union. And the fact of the matter is, I had to drop out of the union, and I wrote a letter to the union saying, I cannot afford the dues anymore. You know why? Because it's half of what it costs for formula every month. That's why I'm not a member of the union anymore. So it's unfortunate that the unions have decided to play politics in this. See, we didn't bring in the political realm. The unions did in this case. That's what happened here. It might have worked for the teachers. I am a teacher. And they never vetted me.
Is everybody
There's no sense digging in the mud anymore.
I want to thank, on behalf of Headline Circle Holders, I want to thank you, Mr. Tremont, and I want to thank you, Ms. Jones, for taking the time and, expressing yourselves. And I apologize for a few mistakes here and there, and I thought it was very well for 2 newcomers to elected office. Good luck to both of you, and God bless. Thank you.